It's been more than a year, 76 episodes since I started this podcast, Legacy Voyage. And when I first started it, it was back in college and I was down in the dumps. I was binge eating at the time. So I was at the dining hall and I was lonely. Like it was really, really tough for me at the time because I was really lost in my life, trying to balance school and work and looking after myself. And I didn't know what to do. So I was listening to the podcast, and in this podcast, it said, you know what? Just start doing the thing. Instead of listening to all these podcasts and reading all the books, just start doing it now. And so I pull out my phone and I tap the voice memo recording and I just start talking. And that's eventually what has become this. And in that first episode, I remember talking about, oh, I want to go out and have this huge impact and create this legacy for the world that everyone can remember me by. But as the years have gone on, or as the months have progressed, I never really thought about that more. So lately, I've been reinvestigating this idea of legacy and what it means for me, what it means for this podcast, and why I started this thing in the first place. And I think I'm going to start off by diving into this idea of legacy with a movie that I watched recently. And it was Bob Marley. Now, we all know who Bob Marley is, the father of reggae who blew the thing up and made it popular for the entire world, basically. And so the other night, I went to watch the movie, documentary about his life. And it was crazy because here you have this kid who's born and doesn't really know his father. And so I think I was reading that at the age of 10, his father passed away. And so it was just him and his mother. And he's just trying to figure out life. Like you have this kid who has this message inside of him that he wants to get out into the world. He doesn't know how to, but he does know one thing, that he has music because he lost his father. So it was this kid and his guitar, and he was trying to make it happen, trying to spread his message to the world as he was going through all these things. And so we know how the story goes. He becomes this huge sensation, goes on a whole bunch of tours. At the very end, he does this big concert that brings the people of Jamaica together. And it's beautiful how driven and passionate this guy, Bob Marley, was about his mission and his message that he wanted to spread to the whole world. And the way he was going to do it is through music. And he did that. Now, fast forward, I'm watching this movie, and I think I get this kick, or at least a bunch of us get this kick after we watch a movie, especially these historical movies, like biographies about people. We go in to do some research and fact check the thing, like which things were off, which things were spot on, some of the little Easter eggs and cool things that you didn't really notice. And I did this with Hamilton, did this with Alan Turing, Oppenheimer, like all these cool historical films that I've seen. And so I did it with Bob Marley. I was looking up his life, looked over the wiki page, started reading some things. I found some pretty fascinating details, but I won't go into those. But what I do want to go into is this part in the wiki page where it says legacy. And as I'm reading through the things that they have listed out under legacy, it was like all the awards he won, all the records that he's put out there that went huge, and his contributions to reggae, to music, to culture, all those things. It had that listed under legacy. And so that got me thinking, not only that, but all the other examples that I've seen of people that have gone on to do something that they're super passionate about. So as I've been philosophizing about legacy, there are two parts of it, I think. And my definition for legacy is this: it's what you do before you leave and what others take away after you're gone. And those two parts are really, really important. With Bob Marley, you have all the best selling records that he put out there, the tours, the songs, the concerts, everything he did before he left, before he passed away. And then there's everything that people took away from his life, the impact that he had on Jamaican and reggae culture that everyone remembers Bob Marley for. And I was trying to think through more about legacy, how to think through it and different ways of looking at it. What I came to was a couple of epiphanies or musings that I call them, like notes about legacy that I've just thought of, and I think all influence and impact legacy in some way. The first one is legacy is inevitable. No matter what you do, if you choose to build a huge impactful legacy or not, you always leave a legacy. It's not something you choose. Okay, I'm not going to leave a legacy today. You always will. Because at the end of your life, you're going to pass away and you're going to have done something with your life. Whether that something was a lot of nothing or whether that something is you working hard every day, you're going to leave behind something. The second thing is that legacy is impact. And I think a lot of the time when we think about legacy, we think about impact because impact is so correlated with legacy. And I don't think they're necessarily synonymous. Like legacy isn't exactly impact, but I think legacy is measured by impact. For example, it'd be like asking this question: how different would the world be, or the person or people around me, how different would they be if I never exist? And that can give you a gauge of the impact or the legacy that I've left behind and I'm building today. But if you expand that out on a long enough time horizon, let's say I died today. I've done a couple things in the 19 years that I've been alive. And over the next couple months, there will probably be a funeral. People will probably come and they'll think of all the memories. Oh, I remember when Dean did this. I remember when Dean did that. And we miss him a lot. And we'll see him on the other side or something like that. And then a year passes and people will still remember, probably like the close family, like my mom, of course, and siblings. They'll probably still remember after a year. Then after a decade, maybe less people remember. After a century, everyone that has actually touched my life will probably be gone by then. After 1,000 years, it's very likely that no one will ever even know me or my name. But even if you expand that just 1,000 years out to 10,000, 100,000, even 1,000,000 years, then you really start to question yourself, why do I even care about this stuff? Like, why do I care about legacy? It's in the long run, it doesn't even matter. And I think that's what I'm most interested in, is this motivation behind legacy. Like, why do I care about legacy in the first place? And I'll talk about that more at the end of the episode because that's super important. The other thing I realized is that legacy is tiered. I think this is the third point, meaning there's different levels or scales to this legacy thing. Because you can impact people and leave a legacy on maybe one person, and at the same time, leave another legacy on a group of people, and at the same time, leave another legacy on the entire world. And there's different levels that my legacy will have to different people. Point number 4 is that legacy is subjective, meaning my future kid might have a very different perspective on my legacy as some random Joe Schmo down the street. To paint that contrast even more, you look at someone like Jesus. No matter what you think of the guy, he has had a huge legacy, massive, but it's kind of controversial because you have some people who look at him and say, okay, he has left this legacy of treating others with kindness and loving everyone no matter what. That's one part. That's one part that people take away. And then you have the other people who will look at him and be like, oh, Jesus was against gay people and he hates abortion and he's against this and that and the other. And he's racist if you read certain things in the Bible. And so you have these completely polar opposite sides of the same thing, which is Jesus and his legacy. And this gets into another point that I thought of, is that legacy is rude, meaning it doesn't care about your feelings or your intentions behind something. And so you have Jesus. He's doing all these things throughout his life. That's the first part of his legacy. And then after he passes, you have the second part, which is what others take away. And it doesn't matter what your intentions were. It doesn't matter if Jesus's intentions in all of his actions were of love and a message of hope and caring for people. Because today, some people interpret his actions and what he has done in this negative light. Another musing is that legacy is action. And purposefully included in my definition that it's what you do before you leave, because legacy requires that you do something, or at least if you want to leave a huge legacy behind, it's going to require some work. Another thing I found is that legacy is controllable, or at least the first part of your legacy is controllable. The way I defined it in those two parts, I can pick which one to focus on. Realistically, I have no control over what others take away from my life. Like, for example, 100 years from now, I have no control over what someone else will take away from my life. Because guess what? Legacy is rude. It doesn't care about my feelings or intentions behind the things that I do. I think it's better for me to focus on the first part of what I do before I leave, because that's something that I think I have way more control over. Also, I've realized is that I think legacy is selfish. And it seems that there's this innate feeling or drive, at least for me, for wanting this huge legacy, this huge impact on the world. And the question is why? And I think it comes out of the selfish desire of, I want to live longer, somehow extend my life. Maybe that's through my kids or through books or this podcast or putting my name on a building But that's what legacy seems like. It's a very selfish thing. And I think it falls prey to the mental model that I've cooked up called the selfish, selfless paradox or dichotomy. Not really sure a good name for it is yet, but it talks to this idea of a lot of the times we think of selfish as this bad connotation, like, oh, you don't want to be selfish. But I actually don't think being selfish is inherently bad. I think some level of being selfish is required to be selfish. Now, obviously, you don't want to take that too far, but in this scenario of legacy and it being driven by this selfish motivation, I think legacy itself can be selfish, but it can be driven by selfless motivation. For example, let's say someone wants to be a billionaire. They want to make a whole bunch of money. Now that is a very selfish thing. I think like $1 billion is a lot of money. So why the heck would you ever need $1 billion in your life? Well, let's say that's what someone's goal is. Now that in itself seems pretty selfish, but let's say as a part of that goal, they have this selfless motivation of giving, let's say 90% of everything they own at the end of their life, giving all of that away. Now, in some sense, I think that that would probably be a good thing. But then it gets into this whole question of what is good, what's bad. But it all boils down to this. I want this podcast to record my legacy. And that's what it's doing. That's what it's been. But what I've realized since the start of this podcast is that my motivation has changed. And it's no longer about making a whole bunch of money and being a billionaire at the end of my life. Although if that does happen, that would be pretty cool, I think. Now it's become more of a journey, a voyage to my dream identity. Because, like I said, in the long run, if you zoom out far enough, like my legacy and what others take away doesn't matter because people will eventually forget about me and they won't take away anything from my life. But I think focusing on the first part and what I do before I leave is really important to me because in that process of doing things before I leave, I want to be closer to my dream identity. And that's what this is all about. My dream identity being Sisu, which is the Tongan translation of Jesus. Now, I chose the name Sisu for a couple things. First one is that I think my dream identity has a lot of the noble values that Jesus embodies, or at least the values that I see him embody, which is about love and serving others and all those things. But then it's also about like him being the greatest leader of all time, him being able to take these 12 nobodies and turn them into leaders who would spread his message. And then there's also this Tongan aspect, this cultural identity that I want to hopefully empower. And there's a couple other things that I've added on to it as I've been listening to like podcasts and stories about other people. One of them is childlike curiosity. I mean, even with this thing legacy, why do I care about it in the first place? I don't know. I'm just genuinely curious about this thing. And so I want to go and investigate and learn more about it. And I think that's one of the values of my dream identity. And so that's kind of how I'm viewing things now. When I look at something and I say, oh, that's bad, I'm saying that's not in line with my dream identity. And in the same way, if I look at something like, oh, that's good, means it's something that is in line with my dream identity. And when I apply that to legacies, I want to leave a good legacy. Or I want to create a good legacy, meaning I want to create a legacy that my dream identity would be proud. I want to do things in this life before I leave that my dream identity will look at and be like, this up, Dave. That's what it's all about. And eventually, my hope is that before I leave, I'm closer to that dream identity. Or maybe I even become it, which is the ultimate goal. I think through all the things that I've been going through, it's all toward that goal. Now, this podcast is definitely different from a bunch of the others that I put out before. And it actually took me a while because I was trying to think through this idea of legacy and I wanted this podcast to be perfect. I mean, you've listened to it so far. It definitely wasn't perfect. It was kind of all over the place, but how forward? I'm just going to put it out there and I'll probably change some of my thoughts, some of my ideas around legacy in the future. But it's been 3 weeks and I haven't put a podcast episode. So here you go. And the reason I haven't done that is I've just been on trips, came back from spring break. Well, let's go through all the things. Update on myself, just my top priority being selfish, which I don't think is inherently a bad thing. Myself in terms of physical health, pretty phenomenal. I mean, I think food addiction or binge eating, I think it's very real. And in some ways, the tougher addictions to beat. Because if you tell someone who's addicted to weed and you say, okay, they just get off their addiction, they're like good for a couple days, and they're not at all thinking about weed and they're completely past it. And if you tell that person, can I smoke this weed, but only in like small increments, don't overdo yourself. They look at you and be like, what the heck? That's like impossible. I'm addicted to this stuff, so I'm just going to completely cut it out. And then you're like, no, you have to take it because it's what you need to survive. And you'd be like, what the heck? That is like cruel. That's kind of what food addiction is. I think if you told someone who's addicted to something, okay, you're gonna have to take this, but don't overdo it. But you need it to survive, so take it every day. Well, dang, I'm done for. But I don't know how. I don't know why, but I think I've overcome my food addiction. I think I've finally overcome my binge eating habits and have moved past it. So with that, I mean, physical health is pretty good, pretty good indeed, especially after vacation. Vacation is when it usually just goes crazy. I don't know. Things have changed. That's a huge update on myself. An update on my people. I think it was amazing. Of course, spring break was awesome. Being able to hang out with the fam and have a good time. That was always great. And with my relationship, it was my first one. And so it was a huge learning experience. It definitely taught me the importance of relationships and how to navigate those and love others in different ways. Because there's these things called love languages. And I learned that they're different for some people. So that was a huge learning experience, but that I'll take forward into my life. And I know for sure that it has definitely helped me draw closer to my dream of dating. That's always good. Now, last update with work. Oh man, work, work, work. So here are the things I'm balancing right now. First of all, you got the 4 classes, which is school. That's, let's say, at least 40 hours a week. Definitely going to be more, especially on finals week. And then there's this Deloitte program that I'm doing, which I haven't been too like hands-on or active with because there's just so many other things that I'm putting my energy and time and effort into. But I think I'm at least going to try to be more involved with that because I think if this is going to be a learning experience that I get something out of, then I'm definitely going to want to put more effort into it. So that's the Deloitte program. And then there's Musings, the startup. So I literally spent the past 3 days coding up this website and it took a while, but I think I finally finished it. And so we're launching that, launching the business directory. That should be good. And there's so many like unknowns with the startup, but it's part of the game. And then the fourth thing is the internship that I'm staying on with search funds. Those are the four major things that I'm doing. And then at the same time, you got all the other priorities in my life, which is myself and my people and making sure I go to the gym and get what I need to eat and all these other things. But I don't know, it's been good. Man, it took a long time for me to record and edit this one. And I think it was because I was falling prey to this perfection syndrome. But I'm just going to put this out there. Definitely not going to be the cleanest, most organized episode, but it's something. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.